So we are back after a bit of a hiatus. We are going to do some remote podcasting, aren't we? We've potentially figured out a way of doing.
Yeah.
Part of the problem was that we live far apart, so getting together to actually do these podcasts was really tricky, and something we've been working on for a while, which we finally sort of figured out maybe is a remote podcasting platform.
Yeah, we've tried every option that was available to us, and this seems to be the most simple solution. And I think as long as they're simple, we'll continue to do them. Won't we? Obviously, the behind the scenes is that, like, when we both travel for work, you live in Brighton, I live in Manchester. Geographically, we can't always be together in a studio, so we're doing our best to. We've figured the consistency is better than getting one podcast a year done. So we're gonna see how these platforms go, and we've never done remote podcasting before, so we'll see what the pros and cons are. We've got a few to line up trial, haven't we? So we'll work through them and see how we get on.
That's it. Yeah, I think if we can do, quantity over quality, like the ones we've done before, it was cool to set the camera up and have like wicked locations and everything. But if we can only do that, like you say, once every 6 months, what's the point?
Yeah.
So, our aim this year, New Year's resolution, is to do more regular ones.
Yeah.
I think we'll do it.
Be consistent with it.
Yeah, that's it.
So where did we leave off on the last one? The last one was actually the plan to go out to the Czech Republic. We had this plan, and over the last 4 or 5 months, we managed to execute the plan. Whether hurdles, etc., and chaos ensued, but we actually were pretty successful with what we getting our plan off the ground. So we've got some progress there, and but yeah, it's one of those things in it that we've got to keep pressing on with. And I've been back since I went back. I obviously went back twice now. There's been quite a lot of progress there, and they. From I suppose the best thing to explain is like the contact we have out there is somebody we both know mutually, isn't it? And it's been he works in the same industry we work in. He's a security professional, so he's not always the easiest to pin down, and we're not always the easiest to pin down. But we're making steady progress with it. So hopefully we'll in the next, we reckon by February we'll get another mission out there and get some updates and some proper footage. I mean, I showed you what the progress was like, but from our side of things, we would have loved for those guys to keep us in the loop with the progress that they were making, the renovations they were making, so we could document that for them and for them and for us and for everything. But it's one of those things. They're a bit old school, and we're trying to bring them into the to the 21st century, aren't we? So,
well, I guess that's the thing to say is like, there's been a number of times where we've gone, on our platforms, whether it's the social media or the podcasts, we've gone, we're going to be doing this, and this. And we've got all the will in the world to do it. And we've been really, like all last year, pushing and pushing and pushing. But a lot of these things are beholden to other people. So it's not always, possible for us to deliver. And we've been aware that we've maybe put some posts out on social media where we've said, next week this will be happening, and it's not happened. And that's because it's not always been in our control whether it happens or not. There are multiple components that need to come together. So I think what we're deciding or have learned, what we've learned and what we're going to do this year is like, when things happen, we'll talk about them, and we'll present them. But what we will say is that we've not given up. It is still happening. We're still going to do it. We still want to do it. It's just that maybe we shouldn't promise something before we can do it or it actually happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd say we like realistically we've got all kinds of we've had all kinds of plans that we've wanted to do over the time, and we've sort of narrowed it down to getting a basics off the ground for them to operate with us. They've got their plans, we've got our plans, and it's just amalgamating them together, isn't it? And sometimes our vision is not always their vision. Although maybe sometimes they tell us it's their vision, but we sort of come across these things that contradict that the cohesiveness of it sometimes. So, but ultimately, the long story short, and what we take as a win is we have made contact with our guys out in the Czech Republic. They are keen. They are happy. They've got a lot of work to do to get things reopened to the public, because I got a lot of in-depth knowledge on the licensing and the not the licensing, but the regulation that they have to follow before they can reopen to the public. But ultimately, it will be a far more impressive site for us to take people out to the Czech Republic and, in some shape or form, have a firearms training package created. That's the end of it. Whether it happens in February or if it happens in June or September, we will find out, because we're still a little bit beholden to the guys who own the facility and the regulation that they have to remap. They've always had the right regulation, but now they've put all this new infrastructure in place. They've got to get it all rechecked so that it's signed off and they're all ready to roll.
And the other thing as well is it's, although that is a big part of what we're going to do, we're really passionate about it. It's not just what Always the Bad Guys is about, that one thing, is it? There's other facets to what we want to do, and I think that's what we're going to focus on this year, is like do the preparation for that in the background. When bits happen and something's happening, then we'll present it and say, hey, look, this is happening, and show it.
Yeah.
And then we'll do the other aspects of it as well, like this remote podcast. If this platform that we're using now works as we hope it will, then we'll do these regular podcasts and talk about other things and have other people on. It really help us, push that as well, won't it?
I suppose the next step from our perspective, I mean, like, obviously our background, our professional backgrounds, our most recent professional backgrounds have been in the security industry. We both got to it through varying different means, but like our intention from our intention from the off was to create this thing, which I think we're actually we've branded up as the Pathfinder kind of thing, and the Always the Bad Guys thing was always a side, not a side, but like an additional thing that we wanted to do from our time in the security industry. We sort of saw a lot of different people from a lot of different places that some were super capable, and you were like, oh, this is really impressive. And then others were like, oh, we can't even get them, you can't even get someone to get on a train or turn up to work on time or whatever. And it really sort of like gave us an insight into the different levels of people's ability when they're asked to do something a little bit out of their comfort zone. So, and then, so, but obviously we kind of, we both got here via very, very different paths, I would imagine, but have both developed quite an array of useful tools to be able to manage with the conflict, the chaos of life, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's one of the things that we've realised we need to do. We need to tell our story, give some context to like who we are. Because there are people who are going to watch this that do know us, but maybe they don't really know our background. And then, people who watch this that don't know us at all, well, then they'll know nothing. We've realised like we really need to do an episode where we talk about like how we got into this and then how we met each other. And then we, over the years, on the scale of life, have not spent a huge amount of time together. but the things that we've done in that short space of time are crazy, you know, and like
Yeah.
it was only like a few months ago, wasn't it, where we were hanging out with my girlfriend and we started reminiscing about some things that had happened, and she was like, "Oh my God, you know, you haven't told me any of this. I didn't know any of this happened." And we do know it's crazy that, you know, it's unusual stories and things. We do know it is, you know, interesting and wacky and whatever, but we are a little bit desensitized to it because we lived it and we were there and we're just like, oh, it happened all the time. But then when you start to tell those, you know, stories about things we got up to, normal people will go they're like, what is this? So we sort of think it's worth telling, because I think it would be interesting, and we've been hesitant to do it because what we don't want it to come across as is this macho bravado security brag, which is a very much a thing that you come across on jobs. Like, right, you always say, what's your tell us your worst fight you got in or whatever.
Yeah, normally the introduction you get whenever I go onto a new job site, especially in the security industry, used to be, "Hi, my name's Emmett. What's the worst fight you've ever been in?"
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and that was always the thing of like, "Oh God, here we go." But for people who, I had a bit of an epiphany about this, because it was one of those things of like, yeah, realistically, that's not normal behaviour in the normal world. You don't. You know, and if you were somebody who was not necessarily in our industry, you wouldn't introduce yourself like that. You know, and you wouldn't be introduced, you know, someone introduced themselves to you that way. And then I had this bit of an epiphany that actually what it is I think, is that our industry, the security industry itself, like, and when we say the security industry, let's be fairly straightforward with it. It's the doorman, the event security, the people who work in venues, the people who work in arenas, the people who work on festival grounds. We're not talking about Afghanistan, Iraq, looking after oil fields and etc. We're talking about like the nightlife industry kind of security operator. But what happens? What I noticed was, I think people can't talk about those instances of where they've been in conflict with a person outside of outside of this industry, because they're looked at like they are a psychopath, like they're a crazy person.
Yeah.
So realistically, the only people you can actually talk to it about and go, "Oh, there was a fight at my venue last night." Most people go, "Oh, here we go, you know, typical doorman." Da, 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 da. Whereas the other doormen go, "Oh, tell me about it. Let me hear it at least." You know, like because it gives them. There's a little bit of safety there. They can talk about those instances of conflict without it being you know, sometimes you might go along and go, "Oh, this person is genuinely a psychopath," but most of the time, another security guy who works in that industry is going to go, "I know where you're coming from, mate. I've kind of been there."
Yeah, they'll know the context, won't they? Because this is really, I struggle to communicate this, but I'll try now. Basically, you can explain a situation that you've been in or something that's happened to you. And it's not always really the fight stuff, is it? It's not. That's the thing that always grabs the attention, and people think it's fighting, and you know, it's interaction with other people, weird interactions. That's what some of those that we've had over the years have had a physical element to them, a physical intervention, or a kind of like a violent physical altercation or something. But a vast majority of them have not. They've just been weird interactions with another human being, you know what I mean? And it's been... And they're often, when we say they're crazy, it's because the circumstances of why you're interacting are not an everyday scenario. You know, in the, like, our time spent out in the Alps, you know, you're up a mountain in the middle of the night in the freezing cold, interacting with a person who is drunk and drunk.
You might be jumping a little bit. You might be jumping a little bit ahead there, mate, because most people won't understand what you're talking about.
I know we've not got to our history, but I will.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, go on.
What I would just say is like that was one of the jobs that we've done. We'll get into it, but we did jobs in the Alps, up a mountain, at altitude, with a drunk person, and our reason for interacting with them was to try to save them from their own stupidity. Often, right? There's not often that most people are in that scenario, and when you are in that scenario, it's so bloody unique and weird and unusual that, of course, the outcome is going to be weird. Yeah. It's going to be an interesting story, you know, and that leads back to us saying, like, the reason we've held off or sort of been hesitant to talk about it is because we don't want to come across as the typical security bragging, you know, guy.
The stereotypical, because there are. I think that there's a lot of people in the industry that are good at what they do, and you know, we always get tarnished by the one idiot who gets, you know, goes viral on social media for unprovoked attacking somebody for no reason or whatever it is. Most security guys, most guys that we work with, they're professional. You know, and they're not there to cause problems. But I think the public perception of a security guard, a doorman, someone who works at a festival, someone who's on the venue, they're there to they get some power trip by ruining your evening. And I can assure most people out there that, you know, 99.9% of the staff that we work with, I work with, you know, my briefings to all staff, when we do a briefing, it's like we are here to enhance the customer's experience, you know, and you don't really remember when someone, you know, no one really remembers when the doorman's just nice and does their job well. It's always the one time when there's chaos happening and the video starts recording 30 seconds after the initial incident. So. Well, I suppose we could kind of go from like, me and you have worked together now for 10 years.
I just want to say I want to say one thing just to finish up that thing. It's like, that's the reason we've not wanted to talk about these stories. We're going to, and because we do think that it's interesting, and when you and I reminisce about these stories, and when we have let someone in, like when we were talking to my girlfriend about them the other week, month, whenever, to us, we more laugh about them, you know what I mean? We're not doing them as a kind of braggadocious thing. To us, they're just like reminiscing. And most of them are funny. They're not violent. Oh, this time we beat this guy, we did something horrible. That's what people always think. You know, even people ask me, they go, so tell me about the fight or something. I was like, there aren't that many. I'll tell you about the crazy time this happened. So
this is it.
That's what I want to outline and basically say. That's where we're going to be coming at from with these stories when we do tell them. You know, we want to tell them as like a good, reminiscing, funny, good time. You know.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is like in 10 years of working with you in various different countries around the world, various different events and stuff that we've done, like very rarely do I find out, hear that Elias has been in a fight. You know, like, you know, I could probably count on one hand the amount of physical altercations you've had. And normally when I go, Elias was in a fight. It must have been like completely like out of this world chaos for Elias to get into a fight. Do you know what I mean? So, and that's sort of that's the thing of like, he must have had, and everyone's going to tell you, there's always that one guy that's like, oh, everything can be solved with like, I was like, if anyone can solve it with non-violence, Elias is the guy. If it has to get to violence, it was not going to be solved any other way.
I'm not a pacifist. By no means am I like a pacifist. There's a time and a place for violence, but I will have tried every option possible to avoid it. Like that's the one thing I will brag about myself. Like, is like I'm good at de-escalation, and there's so many other people we worked with and saw where we're just like, that guy antagonizes the situation. That's not me.
No, no,
I mean? That's not me. So yeah, if so, rarely was there, aggression, violence, all of these things. You got yourself a reputation. I do not know how, because I spent years with you now and doing jobs with you. It's like, Emmett, you look a certain way, right? And
I look like a stereotypical doorman. I know.
And you do martial
art,
art.
I look like.
And you're a big guy, so that doesn't help. But you still managed to get this reputation of like, oh, Emmett. I was like, I've seen Emmett talk to someone for like 45 minutes straight, trying to like avoid a ruckus.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I know. I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose so. Like, I mean, I can't remember what year it was exactly that we met, but to sort of like to paint the picture, like I started as a doorman. I started in the security industry when I was like 20, I think. I was doing probably one of the worst jobs I've ever, I've done some chaotic jobs in my life. But this job that I ended up doing was I was delivering newspapers on wholesale standard at 3-4 o'clock in the morning every single day. I bought my own van. I was doing, and it was a pretty killer job. I was delivering thousands of newspapers, driving around, and I was like, oh, I just kind of need to, and I wasn't really enjoying it. It was just paying bills. And then I got this a friend of ours said, oh, would you be interested in coming to work security at his nightclub? I had to go and do my training and whatever. Did my SAA training, my door supervisor thing. I was like, okay, I'll go and do it. I went to this sketchy hub that was doing I wouldn't say they were ticking the box courses. It was just the guy that was running it was kind of like there's 10 guys here. You're all. I'll be honest. It was a pretty horrendous sort of location. It was in the middle of Halifax somewhere. It was all people. It was all people that looked like me, all rocked up to get their security license. And even the homeless guy outside, when he thought this was 9 a.m. in the morning outside a pub in Halifax. He was like, "Oh, is this a EDL rally?" I was like, "No, mate. This is a security training course." Yeah. Oh, right, okay, never mind, no worries.
Yeah.
It was that kind of level of thing. And the guy was like, "Look, we'll tick the boxes, and we did all the stuff you're supposed to do. We did legitimately do it, but it was a little bit it is what it is." And I got my license, and I went and worked this nightclub in Halifax. That was my first ever gig. And so I'd done door work for a while. I'd done the festivals. I'd sat on gates in the middle of festivals and done night shifts and all that kind of shit. But then I applied for a job, which is kind of where the things kind of took an interesting turn in my life. Was that I applied for a job to go and work at a nightclub out in the French Alps, and I applied, didn't really know much about it. Went down, did an interview with 2 people that turned out now still to this day kind of my best friends. One of them we talked quite a lot. One of them ended up being my boss for 6 years after the job. I worked out. I think out of 250 candidates, me and one other lad got the job, and I never met the other guy before in my life, but we met in Liverpool airport. We shook hands. We made really good friends. Still chat to this day every now and again. And he's he's one of those guys that if I needed him or if he needed me, we'd be there. And yeah, so I went out to the French Alps and worked as a nightclub doorman. Been doing the job 3 years, I think. By that point, I kind of didn't really know what I was getting myself into, and yeah, I didn't speak any French, couldn't ski, couldn't snowboard, no nothing. I just went, and because it was the adventure, so still can't ski, no. But yeah, and then that was kind of the starting point of it. It was a very intense kind of job. we were kind of sold a dream a little bit. We went and I went out to this really nice for like luxury nightclub out in the French Alps. We were like, cool, this will be a cool gig. Little did we know there was some darker sides to that world, as naive 23-year-olds going out and working out there and whatever. But and then there's quite a period of time before I met you that I'd worked out there and done some things, but ultimately we met because we'd got the contract to do a. Should I fill in the gaps, or should I just explain how I met you?
Well,
because it's quite a long story, but it might be quite
long. Yeah, Phil. What I reckon we do, because we may as well just say it. We're on a time limit with this one because we're on this trial. Yeah. So we've got an hour, right? So
yeah,
we'll do. What we'll do is we'll do as much as we can in this episode, and then we'll do when it ends. It ends, and we'll do part 2. Tune back in next time for part 2. So I reckon just say everything. Yeah. Say everything, yeah.
Okay.
There's no rush.
So ultimately, I got this job working out in the French Alps at a really quite a famous nightclub. I didn't really know much about it because I'd never done the skiing holiday thing. I didn't understand it, but a lot of people knew where it was and what it was. It's quite an internationally famous place. And there was myself, and there was 1, 2, 3, usually 4 other English lads out there, and we would then work with a French guy or 2 French guys, depending on what was going on. Looking back at it, I was 23, my colleague was 24, my boss was 24, and my other colleague was 23. And I look back at it and go, we were children. We should not have been running a nightclub in the French Alps. It was not, as the security team for a nightclub in the French Alps. But it was what it was. And as time went on, we developed quite a good relationship with the resort. We were a fairly solid security team. There was some chaos in the mix throughout the years or so, but I think we ultimately we made contact with a guy who had just started his own music festival in the French Alps in a separate resort. And he asked us whether we would do the security for it. So we did. It was a little bit of a weird festival because it wasn't like big stages and stuff. He basically made an association with some bars. Things would go on in the bars and they would be under his brand. So we provided a team to that, and we brought guys out from the UK. We drove out from the UK in 4x4s, and it was a really Gucci job. He then established his event in a different resort permanently with more infrastructure and made it into a real festival. And that is how me and you come to meet, was that during that period of time, the guy who was my head doorman and another guy that I'd actually not really seen much of, to be honest, in my time initially, they were friends prior to all this happening. They created a business that sort of sat dormant in the background. And as things started to pick up and things were starting to look like, oh, we're actually being quite successful here, they brought their company in to take over the contracts for our nightclub venue, a few other nightclub venues that we'd secured, and this festival. So then we advertised out to recruit staff to come assist, which is when I think you came across us.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've been doing it a few years, though.
Yeah, I've shortened that process down a little bit.
Right.
I think I've done 2 years. I've done 2 years out there working directly for the venue, and on the 3rd year was when the 2 lads decided they were going to try and create a business out there and and that's when we started to secure some other venues, other contracts, other stuff, and we started to move out into I mean, I'll be honest, like we were like 3. There was myself and the 2 that I won't give their names up because I don't know if they want to be online. But I suppose like there was myself, there was John, there was Ant, and there was a lad called Darren, and that was the four of us basically, and we somehow looked out in the context that we were still in the EU when we went over to France, and so therefore we all got equivalency because the EU law said that our training was equivalent to French training. So we were all given our French security licenses via the CNAPS people, who are the French SIA. And we, as 23, 24-year-old English dudes who, between us, spoke like, after a couple of years, our French was varying. But we could hold a conversation, we could kind of like get around, and we made contacts with the French security staff and other doormen and other clubs and stuff. We'd actually like established ourselves as quite a good company. And there was a lot of CP operators out there that were a bit baffled by what we'd done, because we created this really good brand. We'd got the accreditation that we required that nobody else seemed to be able to obtain. And we were sort of like this like strange, like most of the older professionals in the security industry from the CP world, they looked at us like we were bullshitters, and we would somehow were like blagging our way through, and we actually done everything correctly at that time. Just from the sheer fact that we all lived out in France, we all got our equivalency, we all got our CNAPs, and then the company managed to get its CNAPs from the help of the venue that we were working for. So we were starting to gather quite a lot of work out there, and we made like this little foothold as a company working in the French Alps, providing all these security services. And then in the summer, after the Alps ski season to finish, we would go down to Monaco, Saint-Tropez, Cannes, and do the film festivals, the Grand Prix. Because we could speak English and French, we had a lot of people who were interested in our services, especially Americans. And so I'm some 23-year-old doorman who's now like running a CP task with Robert Pattinson, because I'm an English guy, speak French, got the right accreditation, right place, right time, and I'm there doing it. And a lot of CP guys and a lot of people are like, how the fuck are these kids doing this?
Yeah. Right place, right time. Not what
right time, right place. Yeah, exactly. And so we did that, and that's how we secured some of these festivals and events out in the French Alps. And one of them was quite a big festival, which we then over the next coming years we'd established a sort of a way of coming across from the UK with at one point 45 members of UK staff, but in the early days it was less than that. And which is how me and you met, was that we were recruiting for this festival to bring people out to the Alps and do this job. And in some respects, we developed this system of recruiting people that, when I look back on it, it was not necessarily the most candid way of recruiting people. Was that we recruited, we would put the job adverts out, and we never lied to anybody and bullshitted anybody, told them we were going to get paid X and then paid them Y. It was more that people fell for the work, that's not the right word. We'd created a brand, a security brand that was quite a, what's the word? Not luxury.
Well, I can speak on this from an outsider's perspective from that time, is that the way the branding came across, actually compared to what the job was and some of the other people that were on the job, was not, what's the word? It was not congruent. Is that the word? Like it was different. It was the reality.
There was nobody out there doing the security game at the time. There was nobody out there pushing their brand as the security company, being this the only word that comes to mind is like luxury brand.
Yeah.
And it was more like, let's be honest, you and I can both agree, we were the first security company out there. Like the company we're talking about was the first company out there to provide really good branding for the staff, for the guys looking to work for your company. When you went on our website, it looked like we were the Gucciest people in the world.
Yeah.
And some of our jobs were pretty Gucci. We had some pretty Gucci jobs, but not every job was like that. We were the forerunners in this like black and white Range Rover in the Alps. Security guards looking, well turned out security guards, shadowy kind of like model type photographs and shit.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of people that came to us to these, and we held really nice recruitment events. We held recruitment events where you would come to a nice hotel. We would do proper like recruitment. We'd get interviewed. We would do team building exercises. We even had a physical fitness test, which when you speak to people now about it who have worked with us for a long time, that was what they were impressed by. They were impressed by these kids were putting people through people through a rigorous interview process and holding people to a standard, like a fitness standard. It involved a run, it involved like press ups, it involved we had to carry a casualty, all that kind of stuff.
I mean, when I came on, we didn't do the fitness test, but I think it was the most comprehensive interview I've ever done and ever did in security.
I think so, yeah. And the standard that it was at.
Actually, I lied. I did do 2 interviews, but it was basically just like not as comprehensive as the one we did. Yeah.
Yeah, and to be fair, the interview process itself, the interview itself was nothing to do with your security, like CV. We weren't interested in like how brilliant you are, how many badges you've collected, how many all that kind of stuff. You could have been doing it 30 years. We didn't care. It was what we needed was it was almost like a personality test. To work out whether you would fit in with our team and whether you could go and be out in this like weird environment that's not unusual to, at the time, most people, and keep it together. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah.
But what that led to was that a lot of people wanted to come and work for us because the branding was really good, the recruitment process was really good, and the actual jobs were good. But the thing was, they weren't highly paid. They were more. It was more fun. They were interesting jobs, but they weren't highly paid jobs. And the unfortunate thing was, I think some of the people that got involved in it initially, right at the beginning, thought that that the jobs were going to be much more highly paid than they were. And I think that was part of the, but I don't want to say it was a facade because we didn't lie about anything. We weren't like bullshitting that we did have these jobs. It was just that, as me and you both know, when you peek behind the curtain of every security company that's going, most of the Gucci jobs that are available and that company has tend to be for the 2 or 3 leaders of the company.
Yeah, that's it.
Well,
that was what was different
anyway,
with this one is like you actually, I ended up doing them and I wasn't the leader of the company. A normal person could apply for those jobs and get that job.
Yeah, that was the difference between with the job itself was that it actually existed. Like we got to a point where we were taking 45 to 50 UK security guards out to the French Alps, whether that was for 1 week or for a season, depending on who you were. And it was actually there and real, and you could come and do it. There's a lot of things out there now where you can, you sort of see, these people working in X country, Y country, da da da. And we're not talking about CP work. We're talking about event, festival, nightclub doorman style work. And you sort of go, oh, you could go work in all these cool countries now. And actually what happens is 5 or 6 people go and you never get a look in. But we, at the time, we were doing it. And that's when that's when me and you met, is that we put on a recruitment day. You found out about us via somebody else?
Yeah. So how many years had that job with that travel company been going on how many seasons or years? Because you must have done like 2 years before I got
the festival. So the festival itself, because they were kind of interlinked. Just to give everyone a bit of like context, one of our contracts that we ended up taking on and turned out to be a huge part of our operation outside of our venues, obviously. In my second year, I think, my second or third year, we were approached by a travel company that would take, specialized in student travel, and they would take university groups out to the French Alps to have their ski holiday, which was in association with the university. And what we would do in our first year, there was 2 of us, but they asked us if we would supply a member of staff to essentially operate as what was like a night manager. And you'd be given, on these first couple of deployments, you were given a group of their ski reps, and they would then work with you in the evening. You'd be like the manager. They go and like do their checks on the hotels and the clubs, and you might have, say, between 500 and 5,000 students, depend as things progressed. But let's say you group of 500 students out, all doing a ski holiday. They're all going out partying and going to like the nightclubs, and and then in the days they go skiing. So our role on a night time was just to essentially babysit the ski reps, who were then going to babysit the students to make sure that they weren't doing anything stupid, weren't falling asleep in the snow, they weren't getting too intoxicated, they weren't having crazy loud house parties. And then if the reps came across a problem in the evening, they would report it back to us, and we would be the bad guys and go, sorry guys, this house party's too much. I'm the security for this for your tour. You need to calm down, or you need to start making your way out, etc. And then that service then grew and grew and grew to where like we were taking out, oh God, in my 4th or 5th year, we had groups of 5,000 students going out. We'd have 15 security staff, a medic. Some weeks we'd have maybe 15 to 20 security staff deployed, but across 6 different ski resorts for 6 different groups, all broken down into small teams, and I would then be managing them. But in the second year, like my second or third year when it first started, I was doing 7 days a week at the nightclub, doing shifts there. And then any day that when these tours would come around during the season, I would break off from the club. I would go and be the representative, or the security representative for either a full team or just one thing or whatever. But yeah, in our sort of heyday, we were sort of like, we had 20 to 30 staff out just doing this, what we branded at the time, resort support, this resort support role. And some people did like full seasons worth of it with us. Some people were only available to do a week, so they come and do maybe 1 week of it. And but it became a huge part of what we did, and it almost became my full-time role during the season. But I was also expected to be at the nightclub as well. So any sort of periods between any weeks when there was no ski trips out, I would be still 7 days a week at this nightclub or a nightclub in the Alps somewhere. Mm-hmm. But then, yeah, the festival. I think we brought a colleague of yours out at one point, who came and did a week with us. and then they recommended us to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, but what I just got to say first is about the thing I don't really know, probably even to this point, is when I came for that interview. Let's say, how many years had you done
Three. The travel.
Yeah, not worry about the festival. I know they were intertwined, but let's just say the resort support stuff. How many years had that been going for before I came on board?
I think in total, 2 years, where it was a large-scale deployment.
Right.
In the context that we had more than one body as the... so we'd done 1 year where we were doing it as like the one...
Just this new thing and you're like trying it.
And it was only for larger groups going out.
Right.
So there was two of us, myself and another guy. We went and did those tasks. And they were like semi one-offs, kind of. Maybe we did 2 a season. So he did 2, I did 2. And then the next year we were asked, can we bring 3 guys, 4 guys, 5 guys, 6 guys? So then we had that run for a whole year. And then the next year, I think you came on board.
Oh my God. So way earlier than I thought.
Yeah. You were one of the first.
Right. Because this is the thing, like, you know, in recent months we've been sort of talking about these things between ourselves. I've always had this feeling like I came along midway through it or something. Like it was already.
We did it for 6 years. I did it for 6 years, if I remember rightly. Maybe 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
So therefore, for me, it was about halfway through the journey. But for you, like it was still in its infancy.
Yeah, because I suppose I must have done it for 4 years. Something like that, was it?
Yeah, 4 to 5 years, maybe.
That does make sense. That does make sense. Well, yeah. So then, in that case, I basically crossed paths with someone. I don't know how I even I tell this bit because I just find this really sort of weird. You know, I live. I don't know if I should give away my town where I live. Who cares? No one cares about me, mate. No one
near
cares.
Brighton somewhere.
I said it. I live in Shoreham, where there's there used to be an air show, and there was a crash, a really famous crash that happened, and a lot of people died and stuff. And there was this morbid, like a creepy sort of job rumor going around where they were like, "Oh, we need someone to look after the morgue where they were doing the autopsies and stuff," which was in Brighton. Yeah. They were doing it in Brighton, but it was in a cemetery. Really, I thought like a morgue was in a hospital kind of building somewhere, but there's this big cemetery in Brighton, and there's this fairly small building there that there's a morgue in or something, and they were doing like the forensic autopsies, you know, of the remains or something, and because it was quite a famous incident that happened, it was getting like swamped with paparazzi, so they'd had security guarding this cemetery and the entrances and doing, you know, checks and things like that. And I was doing that job with this one other person. But at the point that I got onto it, no one was coming, no paps or anyone was turning up. So we were just sat in this cemetery, like all day, just killing time, you know, just chatting and everything. And it was a female security, you know, I was working with, and I sort of recently got into security. Obviously, I got into it by doing my CP course just straight out the bat, which is probably what I should explain first, isn't it? Really, rather than picking up on your bit. It's like how I got into.
Go for it, mate.
I can tell it fairly quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think we because between the two of us, we've gone very different. We've had very different
paths of entry into
pathways into it.
Yeah. So I I've had very mixed background in jobs that I've done over the years, and I won't go into all of that in detail. But I've worked in like television. I was a DJ for a long time. Did like club night promotion, amongst other things. All sorts of weird and wonderful things I've done over the years. And I had a bit of I knew someone who was a CP, and I knew them through airsoft, which is like paintball. For those who don't know, there's a sport called airsoft, and I met this guy as a friend through airsoft, and found out at one point, he was a CP, but at the time, bodyguard. And I was like, mate, how did you get into that? That sounds amazing. And he's sort of like, yeah, little did I know, it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
But, he goes, oh yeah, this is how you do it. And I couldn't grasp it. I couldn't get my head around it. Years later, he phones me up and he says like, oh, I think you had an interest in doing the CP course, didn't you? There's come an opportunity for you to jump on one because there's been a cancellation. You can get it at this really cheap rate. And I was like, oh man, I'd love to go and do that. But at the time I was working at a club that employed me, not under a contract, but it was like regular work. I had to be there every week and I couldn't, disappear for a month. So I had to say to him no, unfortunately. And then that club, even though I wasn't on a contract, effectively sort of made me redundant overnight. The club was sold and they left me like high and dry. And I was like, you assholes. I was like, I could have gone off and done this CP course, but I was loyal and I stuck around, and then this is how I get rewarded. So then I contacted him and I said, mate, I want to do this CP course. So I got put in touch with a guy who was running these courses, and that's probably a story for another time, because that's very, maybe our CP courses.
Same for mine, yeah.
Separate episode, but I'd done the course, so I went straight into, I didn't go do like DS work or, I just went straight into doing the CP thing, got my qualification, and then got chucked out into the world. And I'm just sort of trying to find work and jobs. And I love the guy that ran my course. I think he's a really good guy, but my one criticism of the course and the experience is that it did kind of sell to me and make me believe that it was possible that I could be making £100,000 a year as a CP. And I don't. They all do, mate. They all do. I now know, and I don't believe that to be true. And so I'm now at this point where I'm kind of dipping my toe into other random jobs, like guarding a morgue, and sat there reading a paper. And I'm talking to this girl and I'm basically telling her about my CP course. And at the time, I'd been sold the dream and I was like living the dream. Oh, I've done this CP course and it's so good and everyone should do it, this kind of thing. So I'm going to her, you should become a CP, so I bring along my workbook and I show her the stuff. And she's like, cool, yeah, I'm interested. She'd come and done one of the travel agent resort support jobs. She'd done maybe a week or two or something. So she goes to me, I've done this job for this company and they're looking for people to get on these jobs. She told me all about it. I was like, that sounds amazing. I really want to do this job. So I applied and I didn't hear anything back. So, I've gone on the website, filled out this like comprehensive form, filled it all out, done it passionately, done a good job. And she told me about how they're desperate for people. They really need staff.
Just throw it out there, mate. I had nothing to do with the application forms at the time.
Don't worry, I was going to put that bit in. I wasn't going to throw you under the bus. I was going to say...
No.
So, yeah, they need people. I'm saying, well, I've filled out my form. I haven't heard jack shit. So I think a few weeks or something go by, and through her, I know when the deployment is, and I know that date's coming closer and closer. And I'm like, it's 2 weeks away. So I ring up the number, and I think I get through to Darren, basically. I think it's Darren I got through to, and I go, oh yeah, hi, I've handed my application form in, and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, yeah, cool. We'll get to it. We're getting to it. Okay, cool. So I'm all excited again. Oh, they're going to get to it. Well, the date comes and goes, and I've heard nothing. And I'm really pissed off now because I didn't have any work going on at the time, and I got all excited about it and hyped up. And then I think what happened is, like, 3 weeks into the season, she then calls me. Are you free to work on this job? Because they're desperate for people. Someone's bailed. I was like, tell them to go and fuck themselves because I've been chasing them to do this job. I want to do this. I handed my form in and I've heard nothing. It's not been accepted. I've heard nothing back. They can get stuffed. They can get fucked. So she's like, oh, okay then. That's that done. So that would have been that winter season. Let's say like the December, January, crossover between a year.
Yeah.
So then the whole year passes. March.
Well, it must have been March when we picked up for the festival.
Well, no, this is what happened. I think what happened was a whole year went past, I'm pretty sure. And I hadn't heard.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure I when she phoned me and I said, tell them to do one. And then I never heard anything back for like a year until the next season come round. And randomly, then that's when you must have picked up the applications, logged on.
Yeah, because there was a point where I took over, trying to like recruit. I took over a lot more of the HR stuff.
Yeah, because I get this email going, your
Which is a
application.
whole other story.
Whole other story. Yeah, that's it. Your application's been accepted. By now, I've had time to like cool off, so I'm kind of like, okay, maybe I'll give these guys a go. And I basically get accepted or invited to go to this interview. But it's, again, I'm in Shoreham, it is in Gloucester.
It's in Gloucester. Mate, I know.
And I'm going, and there was another girl who had also, from round my way, who had been accepted for this interview. And I think what happened is, because I was still a sort of like arsey mood about being chipped off originally, I was just playing a bit more hardball. So I was like, yeah, I can come to the interview, but you're going to pay for my travel costs. It's Gloucester, it's bloody miles away. If you want me to come there in person, I would have bent over backwards last season. But now I'm like playing a bit harder to get. So they agree to pay like some fuel costs or something. But they go, this girl's near you as well, you have to give her a lift, to come along to it. So I drive there with this complete utter stranger, but she's really nice and we get on and everything. And that's when we meet,
yeah, so you arrive in Gloucester.
Yeah.
All suited and booted, and then I meet you in this. Me and the one of the other lads is there, one of the directors, and we do the interviews, and I'm all suited and booted, so we're very formal at the time. But I remember the interview being go for it, yeah.
So we're going to run out of time in like less than a minute.
Yeah.
And now that we've reached the point where we finally met, that might be a really good point to stop.
Yeah.
And then pick up in the next episode.
Yeah, later down the line. What happened after?
I think so. Yeah, do part 2.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this has been a good tester for us doing our remote podcast, and if this system works, we'll keep using it.
Yeah, I think so. So we'll definitely do another one soon. We can't leave it long.
Yeah, come back for part 2.
Part 2, sweet. All right.
Cool. All right.